Hans, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, great to see you. Since we talked, uh, there's been some things that have happened for you professionally, and we'll get into that. And we're gonna dive in kind of in a very specific area today. We're gonna talk a bit about two records and the process of making those records in Atmos. So all my Atmos, you know, curious people out there will be excited. All my Atmos haters will be like, "Oh man." So you're in Munich right now, right?
You're getting the full Monty of my hole in the wall, under the roof semi studio where I do, all the geeky stuff before I go into a proper MSM studio. And this is like between Munich and Salzburg. It's sound and music country. So it's like about 40 miles from the very hills that are alive with music. So
No kidding.
I'm European, so renting is quite normal.
Right.
And it's just, it's a, I don't know, 5-bedroom place with a little thing under the roof. And the qualification for this wonderful studio of mine was that my desk fits into it. The acoustic treatment are my records over there, and that office stuff back there, and a bunch of books over here. And I've been kind of building it up, not without meaning to, over the last 15 years, really.
Okay.
It's a bit of bling, and you can see behind me.
I see your Studer.
Yeah, I bought a Studer about 3 years ago. Currently with 6 working tracks, but it's a Mark I, so it's one that still really adds a lot of texture and colorization to the sound. So it's kind of my biggest plugin. It's really good.
Is this on the ground floor? Because I always imagined that it was on the top floor.
It is. It's on the 3rd floor. So
Oh,
like the 1st floor is where my landlord people have like vacation home there almost every year, and then the 2nd and 3rd is where I live with my family.
so who did you con into helping you get that Studer up to the 3rd floor?
Yeah. So this is really actually a funny story. So this is a guy, I don't know if you ever heard of him. It's a guy named Eberhard Schoner, who is a pretty big film and classical dude in Germany. And he's actually the guy who discovered Sting. So he worked with Sting and Annie Summers before the Police. And they're still friends by all accounts. And he's the guy who bought that huge Moog that George Harrison used to have that they used on Abbey Road. So he
Hmm.
bought that, and then he rented it out in the 70s to George Moroder. And that's the one that was used for I Feel Love by Donna Summers. So he's quite the guy, and he had this tape machine. And the poor guys that moved it into his place didn't have enough paint yet, so they were willing to get paid to schlep it up my staircase. I had to paint the place afterwards, but that's all right.
There's a few dings in the wall.
Dings and dongs all over the place, yes.
Wow.
It was well calibrated, that staircase. Yeah.
So let's jump into it. Let's talk about this because since we last talked, you won a Grammy. It's not just winning a Grammy. You won a Grammy for the Atmos mix of Peter Gabriel's IO record, also known in if you have all the mixes, it's the inside mix because Chad Blake is the dark side, Spike Stent is the bright side. And if I'm correct, it's a box set you can buy in Europe with 2 CDs of the 2 mixes and a Blu-ray of your Atmos mix. Is that right?
Not just in Europe. You can get that. It's like, so there are a couple of possibilities of, proper of CD setups. You can either buy the dark side mix or the bright side mix or those two together or those two and mine. And that's the green one. And it, it's really cheap. I think, I don't know what it is now, but when it was released, it was around $25 for all 3 of those.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and it was a really cool idea because they thought about it at Real World, and it's like, so how we're gonna, other than streaming, how we're gonna get this wonderful immersive mix into the open, and they kind of looked into how many copies Blu-rays usually sell, and they went like, huh, and they put it in that 3-pack afterwards, not expecting much, but at least here, that turned out to be the best-selling hard copy format. So for me, that's the way to go. Just pop in the Blu-rays with your CDs and make it cheap enough, because I'm sure most people don't have a Blu-ray player. But if you add $4 to the 2 CDs you want to have,
Right.
why not get the full thing? So there you have it.
Right. I'm actually on the verge of setting up a whole system in our living room all this time, like I think I've been now involved in Atmos for like 5 years and have yet to have any kind of Atmos set up in the living room.
Same here. But I'm
Yeah.
married. Are you?
Yeah. Yeah. And I was going to say,
Are
I
you
hate
gonna
to say
stay
it.
married,
Yeah. Are
Matt?
you going to stay married? Well, I figured out a way around it and I kind of, I'm going to make it as covert as I can, but a Blu-ray player will find its way in there. First off, just a comment on the hard copy aspect of it. I won't go into a long rabbit hole story, but that the physical part of music sales has been a topic of my last couple rants for working class audio. It's something that as I get older and I realize, wow, there's huge value here for the artist as well as the consumer. It's really it's great to hear that this is priced really nicely, I have to say. And what you get for that 25 bucks, 25 euros, whatever it is going to, wherever you are and how much it is, that's pretty, that's pretty economical considering that. I mean, I go to the record store and you can buy a vinyl copy of something that's like $38.
Which is where they lose me. I remember when records were what, $10, 15,
Mhm. Yeah.
and then the CD was 17, 18, and and I'm like, I'm one of those people who goes to flea markets and gets the weirdest fucking stuff that you'd never buy for real or you can't stream. Bulgarian whistlings from the Highlands, whatever, for
Right.
scratch for €2 just to kind of grab samples or just get inspired by textures and stuff. But I don't get it. But I do get, the physical thing. I do believe that's for example, with the album I just released, I didn't make any stereo mixes. I made dedicated binaural mixes. So if you go on Spotify and you stream it, you don't get a stereo mix. It just happens to be a binaural mix that works pretty well on speakers. Because, I mean, I don't want to get, this is Geek Place, yes, but I don't want to get too geeky on this. But I figure if you make a binaural mix, not everything has to be binauralized. So certain things like the vocal or, the basic beat for me are still in the head. And then I use a variety of binauralizers to get the best effect out of certain things. And I reamp some of the things like heights with a KU 100, and then combine them. And all of a sudden you have a mix that I feel sounds much better in headphones and is much cooler binaural, and it's compatible with speakers. And where I'm going with this is, if you do it that way, you can even press it on vinyl. So you could release a vinyl record for headphones.
Interesting. I'm gonna pause on that for a second. I do want to come back to that because my knowledge of you of our conversations is that you do a lot of exploration of binaural presentation of music. Just bringing this back to your record and Peter's record, what the connection there is essentially Peter heard your record Tearjerkers.
Correct.
And was that a deciding factor in him picking you to do IO?
No, see, what happened is that I got into immersive sound, and I'm not saying Dolby Atmos on purpose because there was no thought about Dolby Atmos at that time because of binaural. Because I figured, you and I are really deep into immersive sound, but we don't have a system at our house where we're gonna listen to it in the living room and sit in the middle and listen to music. Even we don't do that. So I thought, wow, I'm not sure that's a form of musical communication that's gonna go anywhere. And then when, I heard the binaural thing, that's what got me. And I got into making an album of my songs, my lost song children in the basement, all those stepchildren that kind of were locked in there over the years, stuff that I wrote with friends that just were never finished, or things that kind of I was part of in album productions that then either didn't manage to take on the role they were made for, or just, didn't make it on the album per se. I took those, finalized them, and just used them to find out how to be creative and immersive. And as I was working on that stuff, that was actually during the pandemic when I was producing the album by the Scorpions called Rock Believer. And I usually had the mornings, a couple hours to work in the studio because, they're nice people who show up in the early afternoon and leave after dinner. So us workaholic audio dudes have some extra time. And then a friend of mine who was at that studio listened to what I was doing and was like, wow, this is really cool. You know what? Andreas Sennheiser, one of the two brothers that own Sennheiser should listen to this because they do a lot of binaural stuff. So he came in one morning and I played him the stuff. He really liked it. And then he said, Peter Gabriel asked me if I knew anybody who was really good at binaural. I'm going to bring you guys together. And I didn't think about that much, but that's what happened. So a couple of weeks later, I got the ultimate fanboy moment. I'm getting goosebumps as I'm thinking about it. Whereas like we got a mail, hey, my name is Peter Gabriel and this is what I want to do. Do you want to help me? I'm like, and in CC were like his tech people and his COO, and they knew me because I had booked the studio before. Then we started like a bunch of Zoom conversations, the four of us, and I'd sent them the binaural album as kind of an opener, what my approach is. So literally the first independent review of my songs, My Sweet Siren Sings, comes from Peter Gabriel, who said it's great and wonderfully emotional, which at that point, if that would have been it, I would have been just fine. But that's how I got into that. And then I did a lot of, tryout, test work, geek work with not Peter himself, but with the real world people. And we tried a lot of things like they had a couple projects going like, can you do immersive for radio? We did all kinds of things and recorded a couple of their real world record bands. And then after about a year and a half, 2 years, that's when Peter asked me to give his album a go and then liked what I did and then went into it. So that was kind of the first step. That's how I got my tools together, I guess, I guess my headlines is probably the better thing. Like what is immersive about for me and what's important and what works and what doesn't. So it was first and then a purely binaural approach. And then the Atmos thing happened in 21 when, Apple and Universal and Dolby just secret handshake. We'll do that now. And all of a sudden, I got into Atmos and then I did that album. And now after Peter's album is out and people liked what we did, I figured I should put that thing out because a couple of companies like, Virtuoso and stuff, people that make dedicated nice binauralizers use it as examples. And I got questions like, who sings that My Sweet Siren Sings thing? And I'm like, well, it's me actually. And they go like, what? Where can we get it? So I figured I'll just put that thing out and upped it for Atmos. Did a couple of bit of tidying up. Redid one of the songs, did a couple of overdubs. Did new binaurals based on the Atmos, and here it is.
Where's the line between musician and audio person for you? Because, I was a drummer. I guess you're always a drummer. It's like Alcoholics Anonymous, right? You're a recovering alcoholic. I'm a
Four on the
recovering
floor,
drummer.
Anonymous. Yeah, that's good.
So, but I don't musically participate as a writer as much. And I do have, as you kind of affectionately refer to them as, the kids, the stepchildren hidden away. Like I have some things that I've done and have never released and don't know if I ever will. So, because I feel that my best role is an audio person, but you obviously felt the call for some kind of artistic expression here. Was that because you really wanted to release music, or is it because you needed, testing, test pieces to experiment with your binaural concepts?
I don't feel like I'm a musician. Oh, I know I'm not a musician. I can
Okay.
sing okay. I can play studio like a mother. But I feel, I've had the huge privilege to work with people like Prince. And you'd see those, clearly he had a lot of charisma and ego and stuff. But when he was in a situation like this with his guitar across his lap, that was two old buddies having an intense conversation, And I've never had that conversation in my life. Even back when I was just, fiddling about in high school, to me, instruments were always just kind of a means to an end where you kind of have an idea and you could want to get it across, or you just like being in a band or you like singing, you need songs. So, you get G and C and D together and you're gold. But I've never had the urge to master an instrument other than the recording studio. And when I became professionally, I went into recording school to do stuff of my own because I like doing that. And as soon as I caught the bug, that was done. I never had any inkling to like cross the divide, if you will.
Uh-huh.
And what happened is I needed, well, there's the one song I keep mentioning that song. It's not the biggest song, but it was kind of the ultimate trigger. There was a song, My Sweet Siren Sings, which I wrote with my friend Steve Larson, who's went to school with me in Minneapolis. So this is a song from 1992, and it was never done. It missed what's now the chorus and the second verse and stuff. It was just kind of a beautiful succession of song parts. And it was one of those things that I dream about. I don't know what you dream about regularly. I'd have, after I quit at Princess, I'd have paisley dreams and stuff, but I never, you have these dreams about moments in your life, unfinished things, if you will.
Mhm.
And I dreamt about that fucking song. I dreamt that I would find the thing that's missing, and then I'd wake up and I couldn't remember it and go, Gah! And I'd have that dream, I think, not regularly, but every 2 years or something. It was one of those that was just kind of in the dream cupboard, ready to come out. So that was one that was a cool side effect. I figured I'll do that. But it was really about, I take the time to do this, and I'll start with these songs that I have. It wasn't like some type of, I need to do this to fulfill myself at all. It was really about being creative. And then 2 other things happened. Actually, really good advice I got. I have this friend called Mac, M-A-C-K. I don't know if you know him. He was an engineer in Munich, and he built Musicland studios. So he was George Moroder's dude. And he engineered, I think, every ELO album of the 70s. And he worked with the Stones on It's Only Rock and Roll. And one of the Led Zepp's albums. And he produced another one, Bites the Dust, and all that Queen stuff afterwards. And blah, 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 blah. He's just
Wow.
amazing dude. And he's lovely. He's back in Munich. And, at some point, he kind of told me about how he met Queen and how he just kind of went, let's do this, let's do that. And he was a fucking engineer. And I'm like, do you think about what you offer and depending on the role that you're playing? And he went like, no, why would I? He really would like pause and think, what? Why would I hide my ideas? And I thought, wow, that's the way to go about it. It's just a way of presenting them. But, I feel like I'm really full of ideas. That's really one of my qualities. It's about capturing them and bringing them in at the right moment and stuff. So that was one of the things. So I figured all of a sudden I offer ideas, and that added songs and participation in my engineering producing work, where all of a sudden I was kind of part of it. So I wasn't afraid to like overstep the line. I would present the idea, and if they say, fuck you, I wouldn't mind, because whatever, but I present the idea. And then the other reason, actually, why I hesitated for a long time to do anything like this is because I once had a really cool evening with the wonderful Ellen Parsons. And we had dinner together and had a long conversation. And for those of you who don't know, but Ellen Parsons wasn't only a great engineer who did Dark Side of the Moon, his first engineering project. Yeah, assistant before. That's his first engineering project. Anyway. And he did his own Alan Parsons project thing, but he was a producer in between. So he had he produced things like, I think Year of the Cat and stuff like that. He was really in there. And he said, when we had dinner, that the one thing he kind of regrets about his own Alan Parsons project thing, which people our age will remember, was quite big. I mean, that was solid pop music, well accepted. The only thing he regretted about it is that people stopped hiring him as a producer engineer because they thought of him as the guy who does that type of music, that type of, I don't know,
Yeah.
do like story pop thing.
Yeah, it's
And
the classic getting pigeonholed.
yeah, and that's one of the reasons I never thought, oh, I should finish that song. And then even after I did, it was really just for me to try it and to do it. And I used it for an academic background thing, but it doesn't matter. Anyway, it was really just for my own, giving myself the space to experiment. And then a lot of people went, why don't you release it? And I thought, Alan Parsons. So the HANS Buff project. And that's where I didn't want to go. And that's one of the reasons, by the way, I also call it Tearjerkers and not me, because I figure I'm really enjoying this now to do creative stuff and kind of being involved. It's kind of morphing into this. And that's a pretty cool header that doesn't mean anything really. And if you and I make a record together, then we can put it under that name too. It doesn't really matter,
Right. It's separating. It's the it's not
It's the
Cyrano de
avatar, I
Bergerac.
guess.
It's just kind of creating, an alter ego.
Yeah. An alter
kind of.
stuff out music ego if the opportunity presents itself.
Let's get a little bit into the geek element of it. Do you think that you approach the whole binaural and immersive, and we'll throw, Dolby Atmos in there. Do you think you approach it in a radically different way than other people, or are you just do you think you're trying to push the boundaries more?
Oh, that's an interesting question. It sounds so fucking arrogant, doesn't it? I feel like, I've never looked at it as a way of filling a space or as a way of mixing. I've always thought, if you need to listen to the music and whatever the music tells you to do, the arrangement, it's what you do as an engineer, a producer, anyways. But whatever you do, you need to translate into the immersive world for it to be worth the exercise.
Mhm.
And I just found a couple of ways to do that. I'm really surprised that not more people are doing it. And it's kind of combined with, a lot of the very subjective choices I've made as a mixing engineer as well, or as a producer, which is, for example, one of them. Um, I don't mind reverb at all, but I feel like if you record room, or if, for example, you record something like a clarinet for stereo and you record it in stereo, anything that kind of has a sounding body or something, it just sounds better and bigger than anything you can do in post pro. And a thought like that, and you blow that up in immersive, just means I need to find a way to record the room better and to really glue the individual sounds that I have around the place to the room. So it feels like I'm being enveloped by music. And I'm telling the story of that music, and I'm not taken away from the narrative. Or, like one of the songs on my album's called Maybe. And that's really the only song I've written for immersive, which was really a game changer for me, because I felt like, if you look at something, my perennial example, Money by Pink Floyd, I don't know if it's written for stereo, but if you take stereo out of that, it's not that great, it takes the whole stereo. Well, the song is great. That's never where I'm going with
Right,
this.
right.
But like, it takes the movement, it takes arrangement parts that are clearly made for stereo. It plays with room there, room gone, big, small, and all that stuff. And that song maybe was written like that. So, the artistic intent and the storytelling was like to change immersions, to be like in different musical spaces, and
Mm.
to play with the transition between the two and stuff like that. And then it kind of grew through Peter Gabriel, I should say. It's not like he didn't add anything at all. I mean, it was one of the great things about doing his record was to have access to that wonderful studio. I had a carte blanche. So when nobody was in there, I was in the small red room mixing it and doing what I had to do, and doing reamps there. There's a little, um, it's not a lounge, but it's like a room between the hallway and the actual studio. And then I go, hey, I need to, I just mix these vocals in surround and 7.0 or whatever it is, 7.0s. Um, I should just reamp them and see what it does. And then I go into the big room, that wonderful big room, which then wasn't set up for Atmos, which it is now, but had still all these speakers in there unused, and they got them going for me, and I pop the vocals through there and record the room. And all of a sudden that thing would just glue and be huge and emotional and stuff. And just all these techniques that I had like theoretically before, um, I put into use. And the ones I did before, like for example, one of the things I always do is um, I re-record bass. So I have a bass, and then I set up like a subwoofer, an active small speaker subwoofer combo, and then I put just a bit further back two stereo mics, usually U87s or something, and record the room. And then I cut off the high of that, just the high cut, and put it in the rears. And all of a sudden you have this big bass thing going. And I did that with my binaural stuff, and I did in this house. I did like the old, honey, don't you have to go to work or something? And then I'd just wire up the place, and just one of the neighbors that might get loud for a while, just kind of, and then I did this, in the wonderful wood room at Real World, and that just kind of built up my arsenal of things to do. What I did, I think, what's different to most immersive mixes, is that I augment. So the best example is, or the first example was Peter Gabriel, Panopticon. I don't know if I've told this last time because I tell it a lot, but it's a song. It's the first song on the album, and it starts as a verse, and that is this electronic bubbly thing, which just lends itself to a great immersive treatment. And then the musical highlight is this chorus, which is like acoustic guitars and his vocal. And that worked great in stereo. It was two guitars and a vocal, but then I tried to make it a step up from that verse in immersive. And I tried like putting the vocal there and the guitars there, and it just wasn't taking the same step as it did, you know, in the rough mix.
Uh-huh.
So I asked, can I record 6 more guitars? And Peter literally said, we've recorded a lot, you know. But he let me do it. So I got 2 guitars then, recorded them individually and with a little array in the middle, and did that 6 times. And now the sun rises in immersive. And it's not for me to like put in my piece or something. It's about translating the stereo musical intent that I had in front of me into an immersive world, having that step up, having that sunshine. And that's what I do.
For the audience, I'm and also for me, I wanna understand a little better about the real world, ecosystem environment. I see I see all kinds of posts, not mostly from you actually these days, but I've seen a lot of posts in the past. And that's not a criticism. That's actually it's fascinating to see. I'm trying to understand how does real world compare to other commercial recording studios? Because my perception of it is that it's like a retreat, that it's not your traditional recording studio from an economic sense. It seems like an artistic retreat that you if you find yourself there, you're quite fortunate to find yourself there. Could you maybe address that and explain it to others?
Well, I feel like, if you're there, you're fortunate to be there, but economically, that's not the case at all. It's actually quite affordable, easily booked. It's not by invitation only. And the beautiful thing is, it's like in the middle, it's in the small village called Box. I'm not making this up. Box, like the box you stuff in. And it's about 20 minutes outside of Bath, England. And, it's so weird. It's this, I mean, Jane Austen was in Bath, so it's literally out of Jane Austen, that whole setup. It's this village that is just this picturesque Hugh Grant who lived behind every bush type place. And it's full of musicians. So Mitch Ure of Ultravox used to live there. Chris Hughes, the producer of Tears for Fears back in the day, and co-writer of Everybody Wants to Rule the World, and drummer of Adam and the Ants. Will Gregory, not Greg Willery. Will Gregory of Goldfrapp has his place there. It's full of people. And the wonderful thing is most people in the village have no clue what's going on. And it's the studio is this old mill. And when Peter bought it, he built this huge place called the Big Room into it, which goes into an artificial lake. It's actually quite distracting, I have to say, working there, especially in the summer where you kind of, in your thick of it of recording, and the swan goes from left to right, from right to left. Oh, there's the kingfisher. Beep, 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 beep. There's my friend walking by, and there's a smaller room called the Wood Room, which to me personally is sonically the coolest place. It's a lot of it's rock walls and stuff, but it sounds great. It's just a great vibe. Bit smaller, and then there's the Red Room, which is the small Atmos room. This is one building. On the top of the building is where WOMAD is, so the festival that Peter Gabriel started, the record company of Real World Studios, and then his own people that run the joint. There's all these small places around that house archives. There's a small side place that is Peter's personal writing room, Peter Gabriel's. And then there's another place where you can stay called the Cottage, and another couple rooms that are rented by people like Stephen Taylor used to do everything you know from the 80s,
Huh.
like virtually, from Howard Jones, who lives there too. Head of the local Buddhist temple. Kate Bush's engineer. That's what he is, Stephen Taylor. Then there's Tim Oliver, who's Robert Plant's engineer. They're just in little rooms like this, in a little side room working there. And then you have a big room which has a cafeteria and 6 rooms where you can stay. And the beauty, if you rent that big room, you get 2 rooms, was it 3 rooms, to stay there. There's a chef on site that will cook for you. And you can get, you don't have to, but like you can get breakfast, lunch, dinner, really nice food for very affordable prices. So it's a beautiful place to just go and make your record for a long time. And thank God they still have both the vibe as a studio and as a place, through Peter Gabriel and all that other stuff that people go there. So the former head engineer, Ollie Jacobs, who also got a Grammy for Peter's record, engineered the 1975 there and met Jack Antonoff's team, and now is part of that team and does, Taylor Swift and Sabrina Carpenter and did Harry Styles and blah, 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 blah. So all these people go there for a long time, and a lot of people come there just for 2 days. I mean, me personally, I came once out of the cafeteria, and I literally ran into Nick Mason, the drummer of Pink
Pink
Floyd.
Floyd, yeah.
I literally ran him over because he was there with his pub band, and they just went into the big room and spent a day recording covers because they had fun.
Which it's funny too, when I was in the early '90s, was in a band doing a record in England at a studio that I don't think is a studio anymore. It was called Britannia Row, and it was owned by Nick Mason,
Yes, by Pink
in
Floyd, I thought.
Islington um, this is going back like 93, 94.
He
But
lives nearby too, by the way, near Bucks. He lives in a place called Corsham, and he has a huge estate and opens it once a year. And you pay a little fee, and he donates the proceedings so you can look at the helicopter and the
very
cars.
Downton Abbey, if you've ever watched that show.
Yeah, I know. Downton Abbey meets
Pink Floyd.
Spinal Tap, I guess. Yeah,
Downton Abbey and Spinal Tap.
Spinal Abbey.
Well, so it sounds like reamping and adding elements is a big part of your toolkit for immersive things, and it's something that you utilized on Peter's record, and have found that I don't know, it really just kind of takes advantage of the media.
I mean, the interesting thing is that, for Peter, that was truly special, is that didn't have to adhere to any stereo template. So I didn't have to listen to the Dark Side mix and make it sound like that. All the three of us got the same session and had nothing to do with each other. You could do whatever we wanted as long as it was great and it told the story in a good way. So I got to do a lot of things I usually wouldn't do. Now, if you would send me something, where there is a stereo mix, which I do, I might still trigger this and that. But, you do that, I assume, in stereo too. You trigger a kick on top of what's there, not necessarily to replace it, but to add a dimension that wasn't there before. And I do that as well. I try to make the beat bigger without losing the punch and think about how to best apply that in the immersive environment. So I feel, to me, to get back to your earlier question, that's self-evident. I don't feel like I'm the king of the coop there just by fiat, not by thou shalt now make things that nobody else does. That's not how I look at it. I just feel like it's not worth doing if you don't tell the musical story in immersive properly. I mean, I live too, clearly, so if a friend asks me, can you do an Atmos mix for me with these 10 stems? I'll do that. But I know it may not be worse than the stereo mix, but it won't be better. So, if I may digress just briefly, there, as you know, there are quite a few skeptics/haters out there when it comes to Atmos.
Oh, of
And
course.
it seems to be like a self-fulfilling prophecy to me because, quite a few producers, I tell them, why don't you talk to me? I'm not going to ruin your vibe, whatever, but I'll give you some hints, some pointers, what you could do and give to me that I can make a really good Atmos mix so you don't feel like you have to water down your stereo mix all the time because the record company does it. And they don't do it because they feel like Atmos is not worth it. And then I tell them, look, young man, if you think about the Beatles, Sgt. Pepper, their masterpiece, the pinnacle of recording in the studio at the time, at least that's what we think now, was made for mono. They spent 5-6 months in the studio. They were even there for the mixes. It was made for mono. And then they went away on vacation, whatever they did, and the stereo mix was made in an afternoon by the very capable engineer and producer. But it was, I would say a non-mono mix, but it wasn't proper stereo with everything to the left and right. And what do you do with 4 tracks? But anyway, it was just an afterthought. That afterthought is what we listen to this day because mono just went away. And that half-ass stereo mix is the one we think is. So I tell these skeptics, just imagine immersive is actually going to persevere and be there in 10 years. Then people are going to listen to my mix and not to yours because stereo isn't it. And they go, but that's how I feel. I feel like, why would you make a musical statement just to add a level of presentation, that lives by comparison to some other idea? Why wouldn't you do something? Why wouldn't you do everything you can to make it stand on its own and fulfill this enormous creative promise that immersive has, which is why I'm in it. I'm not in it because I needed something new to do and I got bored with stereo. I like stereo. I have no problem with stereo. But I feel like if you create an immersive everything else can just go to hell. I mean, it's not even a close comparison. And my thing is, I always feel like the ultimate goal of all this will be that the whole like, oh, there's the stereo mix, there's the immersive mix, goes away. And you just make an album of 12 songs, and 10 songs are in immersive. One is in stereo and one is in mono. Why? Because the music is supported by it. It's just a way of mixing. It's not
Right.
an alternate mode of presentation. And so whatever I can do in the studio to get there without changing the vibe, most things I do are subtle enough that if you listen to the stereo version, if it's a comparative mix, you wouldn't know that I did anything that is augmentative. But I do. I did.
And I've been arguing this point that from the artist perspective, if I think in the early days when Apple got on board and the other, Tidal and Amazon, the system that existed was stereo mix augmented by Atmos mix, and the term that drives me fucking bananas is beating the stereo mix, or whatever. And so you were always tied to the stereo mix. And a lot of that, was based on, obviously you have the limitations or the confines of beloved songs, catalog legacy work. And, you just don't want to ruin that experience for people because people love those songs. Um, but now we're at a new spot. Um, Physical media is selling more than it used to, not to the level that it was in the early 90s, but so Blu-ray is a possibility. Pure audio streaming from former WCA guest and good friend of yours and somebody you work with quite closely, Stefan Bach and John Reichbach, doing that. So you're not tied to a stereo mix through their system. Immersive audio, immersiveaudioalbum.com. Once again, you're not tied to the stereo mix. And those have very progressive financial incentives for the artist. So the ability to you can make better money streaming on pure audio streaming as an artist than you can on Apple or the other systems that obviously Spotify. That's, we know how
If so,
that goes.
yeah, if there's a subscriber and he just plays your album once that month, he will make more money than anybody below, superstar level is going to make on any of the other streaming platforms because it's based on your choice and not on the number of clicks that you generate. But anyway, yeah, I totally with you. I think that's hardest for people our age who started with one physical format, switched to another physical format, had a couple other offerings, but it was kind of, it's all vinyl, it's all CD, it's always the new format, which then all movies have to be on DVD all of a sudden,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And so they think if streaming is the thing, we all have to put that on streaming. You don't have to. If you're a medium-sized artist, just go out and press 1,000 albums and sell them at your gigs. You'll make more money. And if there's stuff like Patreon, there's Bandcamp.
Right.
You don't have to do everything. That's my point.
Right. You can do anything you want. And you don't, I think that people feel compelled to be up on streaming to be taken seriously, which is funny as hell to me at this point in time. But now you have all these other alternatives, which I think is great. And it really opens up a big conversation, economically speaking. Um, I keep meaning to come back to this. Every time you say binaural, and I can't help but think about Chad because Chad's been exploring binaural for a long time. So it's interesting to have, this kind of combination of you, Chad, and Spike all contributing to Peter's record.
I've only met him once so far, which is a shame. I'd
Who,
love to.
Chad?
Yeah, I'd love to
Oh,
hang. Just
he,
one dinner or something. It
he's
was
lovely. He's
yeah,
awesome.
great guy.
I've never met Spike. It's just, I think it's interesting. And I wonder if in the future there could be a collaboration there, between you and Chad and the binaural aspect of this.
I mean, do you want to hear my geeky binaural approach?
I would love to hear it.
So when I got started in the binaural thing, I'm just talking technology now, not the creative approach, but like I checked out the binauralizers I could find plugins, various types, and they were all not bad, but they all colorize the sound so much. It's just like right now. I mean, if you listen, if you make an Atmos mix, then the Dolby renderer puts its sauce on the entire thing, on every sound you put through there. The whole mix is being Dolby renderized, and that's what you get on the headphones.
On the binaural side.
Yeah, I'm just talking binaural at this point.
Right.
And so when I got started, I was like, why would I just use one binauralizer? Because when I mean, you just probably like me, by choice and by bundle, I have hundreds of compressors in my plugin folder.
Uh-huh.
Now, if it were just about dynamic control, I'd need one, but it's about adding color, and that's why I use these approximations of old analog plugins or stuff that can do more. It's about the color they add. So I figured I'll just use binauralizers like I use compressors. So I have like 6 different binauralizers or whatever in my session, and I check, okay, which one of those, to me at least, does the rears best, and which one does the sides best, and which one does the heights best, or which one is best for my toms. Does this fuck up my drums or something? And so I would have all these buses where I have like a bus going in, a multi-channel bus, and then I have binauralizer on it, check it out. And then the output clearly, if you binauralize something, becomes left-right. I don't want to say stereo, but it becomes a 2-channel output. That's the whole point of binauralization. You take multi-channel, you make it ready for headphones for 2 years. So you pop that out, meaning I can put my stereo chain on there. So all of a sudden I have binaural things. I can EQ the result. I can compress it. I can use parallel compression. I can use whatever I want that I can use in the stereo world. And on top of that, there are certain elements of my binaural mix that I don't even have to binauralize. Like I said, the vocal still in my head. So I have like a final bus. Some things go directly there, unbinauralized, and then my 6 binauralizers, whatever it is, go in there as well. I have a master bus for these 2 channels, and then I bounce it. You have a binaural mix, which you can now hear on Spotify, for example, that doesn't have immersive at this point. That is a binaural mix that is made for headphones. And it sounds good. It doesn't sound like somebody pulled like a curtain or a bucket of paint over my my mix. I can make choices that also don't change, you see. So, my binaural mix will be the same binaural mix in 10 years. Whereas the one that Dolby Atmos generates or Apple generates will change in a year when they probably be better, but when they change their algorithm.
Because it depends on the decoding.
It becomes the decoding. They have a binauralizer in there that takes every sound that is in there and makes a whole binaural mix out of it. Whereas I take individual parts.
Tell me if I'm full of shit on this. So back to the kind of, the format haters, the Atmos haters, one argument that a lot of them have said is, well, everybody listens on headphones anyway, and unless I can make it sound good on headphones, then what's the point? Hence, what you're talking about, trying out different binauralizers. It's like, if that's really the argument, then why aren't those people focusing in on really expanding that presentation in a binaural sense? And if you ask them, I bet a lot of them would say, well, what if somebody plays my stuff on speakers?
Well, play my album. You see, my Tearjerkers album that I just released is out there because I want to show people what's possible. And not just, I can say it from now on in situations like we're having right now, check out the album on speakers if you want to, on Spotify if you have to. And you will maybe think the mix has some weird elements and some balances may be a bit off, but it works just fine. It works fine on speakers because certain elements aren't binauralized, and the difference between the color palettes, if you will, is different enough that it doesn't feel like it's a one side. It's not like a wall of sound thing. That's kind of what the decoding binauralizing thing is. When one binauralizer takes a whole mix, it's kind of like Phil Spector's wall of sound. There's nothing wrong with that. But if I don't know, if I put Beethoven through Phil Spector's wall of sound, or Yesterday by the Beatles, I'm not sure that'd be good. It's an all or nothing approach. And by not having that all or nothing approach, a friend of mine actually pointed this out to me, that I invented, to him, binaural mixes that are compatible to loudspeakers, which wasn't my intention at all, but just that's a wonderful side effect. And my thing would be, if I get too geeky, let me know. But this would be possible for everybody if you mix in your Dolby Atmos renderer and you just take two objects where you don't set the binaural settings to small, mid, far, but to off. You can put your dedicated binaural mix through there if you wanted to, like certain things, like the vocals, the drums, which would mean that in the the mix you get when you listen to Dolby Atmos on Amazon, for example, the headphone mix would have that stuff in your head and it sound better. The punch would be there more. But unfortunately, you can't do that because Apple Music, in their wisdom, are ignoring these settings. And my wish would be that you can just, if you want to make that choice, it shouldn't be mandatory, but if you want to make that choice of making a binaural mix, that you can pop it in with your Atmos mix, with your object mix, and the decoder, which would super easy. Other codecs can do it already, but the decoder says, dude has headphones on. I'll just switch mixes rather than taking that object mix and running it through the binauralizer that I brought along. But I have a dedicated mix in there that's going out there. This is all future stuff, but you know what? That's the beauty of these times. And to be fair, that's why we're talking right now, is because we're kind of in a pioneering stage of immersive. And thank you, Apple, and thank you, Dolby, for opening the door and making this a big thing, in a lot of listening experiences. So we have the opportunity to make good music for it. And whoever has a good idea now has a chance to bring it along. That's the beauty of it all.
Yeah, and I wanna ask you something because I'm a little confused by something that you're talking about. Do you and you're gonna if you can, I would love to get a list of the binauralizers that you use to share with others, but are you mixing and matching binauralizers in the same session?
Correct.
You can do
6 of
that.
them. Yeah, I have like 6. Sometimes there's a bit of, like for example, Waves and Virtuoso don't get along. Waves and X, which by the way, it's only 5.1, but it's one of the better sounding ones as far as I'm concerned. Virtuoso sounds great too in a different way, but there start to be clicks in the end between those. There's some weird thing between those two. But meaning at some point before I bounce stuff, I have to make one of them inactive, freeze it, and then make the other one active again, and everybody's happy. But I can put 5, 6 things in there. So what do you hear, though? I could tell you, I just finished them before we released them. So the binaural mixes, on the stereo side mixes on Spotify of Tearjerkers, I have in there Virtuoso. I tried Rhyme. I think I used it in the Neumann one. I use Wave and X. I use one that is no longer available, unfortunately, but it's really good, called Simpan. I use Illusonics. And I don't use all of them all the time, but sometimes, that works. I use the Dolby one that's still in play. And I use the Apple one by way of audio movers. So those are the ones I use. And I reamp. So I feel like the worst job that binauralizers do is for heights. That just never really works. So for those, I'll just take the binaural head, sticking in the middle of the red room, play my mix through just the head, the heights, and certain chosen objects maybe throw around, record them binaurally, and pop them in the mix.
Do you have any tips for those who don't have access to real world and that they wanna, do reamping of stuff like that?
You mean like for binaural when you want the whole thing, or do you want, or for sounds?
Yeah, just in general, like if you wanted to, basically take the exact thing that you just said, but remove the red room from it and just
No,
say,
the red room isn't that big. Seriously, if you go to a nice Atmos room like McKay's, for example, that's perfect. All you need to do is you need to get your hands on some binaural head, and that actually the most difficult thing about it all is to record it. So you have the same clock thing going in the same session, because aux I/O is very tricky when you go with the Dolby Atmos bridge. So you have to play, through Dolby Atmos and record through something else. And so what I always do is I record some click sound at the beginning so I can visually line it up, because it's really funky. So I record, let's say, one thing in the same session, and the result is that that click is like a second behind, and so I move it up. With the next track where I do it, it's a second ahead. There's some wacky shit going on. So you need to make sure that you can line it up properly.
you said something, you mentioned McKay, and we always have to think of the audience here. So we're talking about McKay Garner, our mutual
Yeah.
friend who's in
Lovely room.
our Atmos group that we
Couple
have.
ambience.
Right, right. He's got an Amphion-based room. Um, Super interesting. Did you, in the process of Peter's record, in creating his mixes, did you learn things from him about how to, was it just all like you doing your thing and Peter going yes or no, or did he participate and maybe bring some things to your attention?
He was amazing. So he was the perfect artist to work for because he very consciously picks you, knowing that whoever touches something creatively will leave their mark on it. He picks you to put your sauce over it. He's not one of those jealous people who like start micromanaging. And he virtually once during the whole thing told me like to put a bit more high end on a snare. So none of that, usual um, how about 1.2 dB, a Q of point, that type of stuff that some people pull. Um, it was all about the musical narrative. For example, there's a song called Playing for Time. It's a beautiful ballad. And in the beginning, at least, it's just piano, bass, and a bit of strings. And so it's one of those songs, kind of like a hip hop song, you can make everything too loud at all times. And I did. And then he came in and he went like, I lose the narrative if you make all of this stuff too loud. So it was clear that there was a hierarchy of musical storytelling in this room, in this thing. And there's in that same song, for example, there's a little, it's almost like an ad lib where like in the distance he sings, "Give in to love." No, that's true. It's a different song. It's "Love Can Heal." "Give in to love," and it was just one of those. It was one of those shooting star sounds. So of course, what did I do? Phew, ran it across the ceiling. Anyway, no, 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 no. The whole song, the whole story, focuses to that one line. So we can't make it the catch up of the song. It needs to be the actual meat of it. So that type of stuff he bring along. He was great, and then he described the mix better than anybody else. I mean, how much? That's why we get all into this, like that song "Playing for Time" I just told you about. He actually shook my hand and thanked me for the mix afterwards because he liked it so much. And then that "Love Can Heal" song, the second one I just mentioned, he mentioned in his monthly video messages of I made the mix where you can touch the mix, you can touch the music, and that's what it's all about. That's what the song is all about. Fuck, man, and that is what I learned. That's what I got out of that guy.
I mean, obviously, this is relevant to you because of, you got to work on this record, but Peter Gabriel is just one of those artists that I think many of us hold in high regard. There's just an excellence there. And so to get complimented by someone like him, to receive, praise from someone like him is like,
Dude, I'd stood at the airport going home. It's not that far to Germany, but it's not a driving exercise, and fucking pinch myself. I'll stop swearing now. But anyway, I'll pinch myself. And I don't know if I ever told him this, but like one of the reasons I got connected with that studio is because in the 90s when I was actually working for Prince, I sent, I think, a resume every year to Real World Studios because I thought that's the ultimate place for an engineer because not only because of Peter Gabriel, but like all that world music stuff. Because if you know how to just record all these types of music and types of instruments, that's just dope. And I hope they don't keep those. But th- I made an album in my Prince time with Shaka Khan, and she had this boyfriend from London at the time, and he was kind of obnoxious most of the times. But at the end, he went like, "You're good. What do you want to do other than the Paisley Park Prince thing?" And so I told him about Real World. He goes, "I have a friend. I'll hook you up." So I got hooked up with Peter's publisher, Rob Bozas, and we were pen pals for almost 20 years afterwards. And when I got serious about wanting to work more in England, I looked him up and we met for the first time. And then I did stuff with him. And now he publishes my songs. My point is, Place is super special. And to me, it is super special. It's super funny too because, young people don't know who he is because he's so picky and slow and doing his stuff and very conscious about it. But all the wonderful young people, my friends now at Real World Studios, they're all under 30 and they all had to look him up before they started working there. They had no clue who Peter Gabriel is. Oh, I've heard of Genesis, that type of stuff. I lead a blessed life, really do, and I'm aware of it, man. It's really cool.
there's, I don't know if this is a product of me getting older or not, but I'm at this stage where, I look at all the the young hustlers out there doing their thing, in speaking of engineers and producers, just, clawing their way to, get the next big thing. And, everybody's posting the Muse IO or the Muse website that
Yeah,
tracks
yeah.
credits. They're posting, like 1 billion streams and that, like, there's just a certain level of hype and nuttiness, and I don't wanna take away from those that are really, really working hard and trying to do their thing. There's room for that. But for me, this situation that you describe, things move slow, things are crafted well, things are done in a thoughtful way, and I keep coming back to, like, a couple thoughts. Number 1, in 100 years, 150 years, nobody's gonna know who the fuck any of us are, right? It doesn't matter, right? We're not making a big enough impact on the world to as audio professionals to change what's going to happen in almost the next 100 to 200 years. So there's that perspective, and then the other part of that is like, when is it enough? Like, what is it we're all trying to do? Are we trying to, like, you know I see some people that are of a certain age group that you're like, what is it you're going for? Like, are you trying to, like, is it money? Is it fame? What is it? And for me, I keep asking, like, when is it enough? As long as you are happy and you're artistically contributing to something, that works for me. I don't have to be famous. I don't have to be rich. Obviously, having more money smooths things over in some cases, but it's not the end all be all. So when I see what you're doing, I think it's great. I think it's well thought out. It's really you're working with somebody who, to me, exemplifies that kind of slow moving, creates something great, hire people that do their thing. I mean, Chad and Spike are Chad and Spike, two very unique people, and you are also a third unique person in this equation that brings something super cool and brings your thing to the immersive conversation. So I know that's a bit of a long-winded rant there on some of these concepts, but maybe I'm just old.
No, you're not just old, but you had to look at it as we're both blessed. I mean, let me tell you once again, just the genesis of this album. So I thought I'd get into this, and I did it in an academic context. I made my master's. It's like a practice-based master's, which is fairly common in the UK, where you have a a study with usually some silly fucking, that's more again, some silly name. Mine was called Master of Professional Practice, and I thought, wow, that took at least half a bottle of whiskey to come up with that. But what happens is you present a project, and if it's deemed worthy, that's the center of your studies and stuff around it. So that was my album, and so I got started into that, and I was just kind of trying stuff and having, by way of master's program, an excuse to do it without having a commercial pot of gold at the end, or somebody going, "Where's the single?" Or your family going, "Why are you doing this? Why are you working 70 hours a week and then you're doing this?" So that was a great framework. And then I just went along, and then it got really interesting. I came up with uh, uh, approaches and thought about, how am I going to do this? And then I just have the goodwill of people, and that is the what you're describing right now. I'm at the point where I bring up my ideas. I've been around for a while, and I get to hang with creative people, and some of them are on my side. Most of them are on my side. So what happened, for example, for my album, I before the pandemic, I did quite a few workshops for a variety of recording schools like SAE or the Abbey Road Institute in Paris, and I go with them to the actual Abbey Road and show them, how to mix, how to record, and whatever it is. And so I had this idea to ask them, tell you what, I record my immersive stuff at Abbey Road Studios. You buy the studio time, and the student can't really do that much. They can be there, and then I'll give you as many days as you want afterwards to talk about it and explain it to them. And I've totally expected them to go like, whatever. Nice try, buddy. He said, are 2 days enough? I'm like, 2 days are enough. So I had 2 days in Studio 2 with these enormous resources in this great room. And invited all my buddies, guitar playing buddies, drummers, keyboarder, bassist, for various parts. It's not like whole band things, but like for various parts of this. And I said, you want to play with me at Abbey Road Studios? Can't pay you. I pay you in mixing time and stuff. You have to pay for your own flight and your own keep and stuff. They all came, and it was beautiful. And I'd be there up there in that iconic place where all the albums were made that got me into doing what I do now, and looked out of that window and saw my buddies play my song. Dude, what a life. And that's what it's about. But, that's probably a good last line. But we've talked about this last time when we spoke, is there's just this raving sense of FOMO in our industry where you feel like, why didn't I get called? And if I don't do that, I don't have a tomorrow. And that's probably true up to a certain point in your career. You always start out as the helper guy in the studio, and then you become the engineer guy to somebody creative. And then you go out on your own and become your own thing. And if that works out, then you need to ditch the FOMO thing and do your own thing and be happy about it and have the courage to do it. And thank God I got to do that now. And it worked out.
I agree that is a fantastic spot to end, but I have one final set of questions from a geeky technical thing.
Sure. I love hanging with you, Matt. We should do that every day.
We should just write. This should just be like a daily
it's
thing.
like,
It's like, daily thoughts.
not working class audio.
Yeah, right. Buff and Boudreaux's beautiful
Shooting the breeze.
hangout. Yeah. Ambisonic.
Mm.
So my friend Dave Godowski, who he does some work with Soyuz, and Soyuz sent over the Ambisonic mic for me to try out, and I'm just kind of exploring mentally, like, well, how can I put this into practice? How can I put this into use? And you've given me some great ideas, actually, but I'm just curious if Ambisonic plays a part in your creative pursuits for either yourself or for others in the creation of everything we've been talking about.
I have quite a few very good friends who are deep into the Ambisonics world, but I feel like it's not that great for music. It's great for storytelling and experimental things. So if you do immersive for immersive sakes, that's fine. And that's not a diss at all. There's some really interesting stuff, which, you can then use if you create an immersive as loop samples, whatever. It's just a whole new stage of thing. But I use it for reamps, yes. And I have, one of the first things I bought was that Ambio VR mic, which for those of you who don't know how Ambisonics works, there's orders, it's called. So the higher the order, the better the representation of the room you're recording. And the lowest order is first order, which is the Ambisonic VR. And that works fabulous for, if you go out and record Spring, or it worked quite well for those female vocals in Love Can Heal. That's I used, among other things, I used an Ambio VR. But it doesn't work well for stuff with transients. So what I've done before as well is like have really nice stereo speakers, run like a dry mix of drums through it, and then put the mic in front of it and try to capture the room, and that just didn't sound that great. So what I do sometimes still use it. I put like gobos up or something that kind of puts a barrier between the speakers and the Ambio mic. And then I record with it, and you don't have the transients anymore. The whole room sound is more undefined, more reverberant rather than direct sound, early reflection-y. And then that works well. But it's a piece of work. I have a great mic called SPC mic. It's called. It's a bit hard to handle because you record it with a USB cable into your session. And that is third order ambisonics. And what that means is, in terms of tracks, it's always the number of the order plus 1, which is mono, square. Meaning for third order, that's 3 plus 1 is 4, square is 16 tracks or 16 lanes for one track. And that just adds up. And then you need a way to decode it, because it's not like recording, stereo AB or having an array with 8 mics. Captures the room in some way, and then needs to be transferred with a plugin into something, whatever you want to hear. That's the idea behind it. You capture the room in its entirety, scene, the whole scene, and then you record it, and then you need a plugin on there that will then translate it into whatever you want to translate it to, binaural or a speaker setup or stereo, whatever it is. So it's quite flexible. And I use that. There's a song on my album called City Limits, and the idea behind it was to kind of open the mind when you listen to the album, that something other than immersive is happening, specifically when you listen to headphones, because as you know, binaural isn't as instantly bigger than stereo as stereo is instantly bigger than mono. So I thought it would be really cool if you just kind of set the scenery that something's happening now that's weird. And when I did my original album, what I did was I recorded a vocal into a dictaphone, and I had some mics that you can stick into your ears, and you could do binaural recordings. Um, and then I'd go wherever I'd go. I was at a studio in Thailand once, and I was in the middle of London, and I was in my backyard. I put these headphones in, and then I'd record the vocal in that scenery. And then in the song, I just kind of edit it together. So it'd go, it'd still sing that entire line, but it would just be. So when I ended up wanting to do the Atmos version, binaural recordings unfortunately don't work. You know, binaural recordings with one of those heads only work when you have total separation between your left ear and your right ear, and you never do when you have speakers. So if I wanted to play that on speakers and have an immersive effect, I had to redo it. So I did the same thing with an ambio mic, and that worked like a charm.
And it's interesting you say that because, I got the mic, I set it up, and I plugged it into I have a Sound Devices Mix Pre 6 here, and it has a, ambisonic, decoding thing on there. Plugged everything in, was listening on headphones, and then taking a shaker, moving it around, and I was just like, "Yeah, this
Mm.
isn't really doing it for me. I don't
Yeah.
really know what's up." But then I was I'm here at my house, I hear my wife and my oldest son yelling back and forth, "Dinner! Yeah, I know." And that's taking place on the other side of a door, and I didn't realize that it had got recorded, and I came back after dinner and was listening, and I'm sitting there with my eyes closed, and I hear this, "Dinner! Yeah, I know." And I was like, "What?"
Again?
And I turned around, and I was like and I opened the
Yes.
door, I was like, "We
Yep.
just ate dinner," and everybody's like, What? Yeah,
I
what's up with you?" And I went back, I was like, "Holy shit, that was in the recording," and that's when it occurred to me, I was like, "This ambisonic thing can be useful from an ambience perspective." It can capture non, what would you call it? Not tactile, but as you say, non-percussive details, just things out, from in a distance. Because I listened to it over and over again, and I was just trying to decode it in my head. I was just like, why does that sound like it's really happening right now? It sounded so real to me, it scared the shit out of me.
But then, that's where it gets, yes, this gets super geeky now. But that's, if you play the same recording and let's say you go to the biggest church in your neighborhood and you pop that in your headphones, you won't have that effect because it won't be the same situation, the same visual situation that you're used to with the dinner call.
Mm,
But that's a whole different, another
that's a whole
sad
nother
subject. But, I had the same thing with when I got started in it. I did one failed experiment where I recorded myself clapping around an Ambio VR mic several times. And that just, I mean, it worked in terms of immersive, but it sounded like shit. And then I had it just sitting. We have like I said, we have a split level apartment and it's an open stairwell. So I had the Ambio sitting there, just record it. And this was during the height of puberty of my kids. So I went, Josie, it's my daughter, and you heard from the top, what? And it was brilliant in headphones. It was literally like me here and her there, and it was really discernible. It worked really well with the heights. Yeah, it's great.
What?
What? Yeah.
Teenage angst,
Yeah,
teenage
teenage
puberty
angst
angst.
in 3D.
Oh my gosh. Well
Yeah.
well, this has been great to see you. Thanks for going down the rabbit hole discussion, and, hope we didn't lose too many people in that conversation,
Well,
but, if you hung on this far, fantastic. Link will be in the show notes. You're gonna send me a list of you gotta send me a list of all these binauralizers. We'll have a link to Tearjerkers, we'll have a link to IO, and, anything else that we can think of between now and then.
yeah, it'd be great. I hope you enjoyed the record. I didn't mention that enough. I'm quite proud of having it put out and actually listening to the music. I hope people don't listen to it and go like, wow, this is a great exercise in immersive acrobatics, but like this is really fun to listen to. It's just great music.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna take a second listen through headphones because my initial listen was over pure audio streaming, which revealed to me that my setup in my studio isn't decoding it properly because I was lacking the heights and I was lacking it on not just your record, but everybody else's record. So, but even that, even the 7 presentation had me going, wow, this is super cool.
Well, thank you. Thank you,
Yeah.
Matt.
We'll have links to all this stuff and people can check you out. So,
Cool.
well, thanks again. Good to see you. And we'll contemplate the future of Buff and Boudreaux.
Rock. Yes, we will.
Right.
Right.
Or
Have a good
that'll
evening.
be our new law firm.
Yes. We screw him in. No, do we screw him in how? Yeah, that
Right.
was car talk. Yeah.
No, do we cheat him and how?
Do you cheat him out? I miss those guys. We should
Oh,
be the new
yeah.
car
Click and
talk.
clack. Right.
Yes.
All right. Well, good to see you, man.
Good to see you too.
Take care.